Pastor Mai, good evening and welcome to this week's episode of Agenda. I'm Ewan Gorn. On the programme tonight, an all-island business rate. Is it a good idea? Is it a bad idea? We hear from both central and local government representatives, Policy and Reform Minister Chris Thomas and the leader of Douglas Council, David Christian. And could the public buy shares in the nationalised steam packet? LibVann says it's a way of ensuring taxpayers have a direct stake in the £124 million investment. We hear from them. The leader of Douglas Council says the introduction of an all-island business rate would be totally unacceptable and result in a drastic cut in services. The proposal's been put forward in a consultation by the Cabinet Office, which is aimed at making the local authority charges fair and transparent. It suggested business rates could be collected by a central agency, with local authorities applying for funds in accordance with national community policies. The idea is intended to give smaller local authorities access to monies without the need to significantly increase their rates to cover loan repayments. Well, Douglas Council collects 61% of its rates income from domestic payers and 39% from commercial. David Christian claims this is a rate grab by central government, which would have a major impact on the council's financial planning. He says the proposal would add an additional layer of bureaucracy, and if smaller local authorities want extra funding, he says, they should up their own rates to pay for new facilities. The consultation also puts forward the proposal that properties be assessed for their new rateable values on their floor area rather than their rentable value. I asked Council Leader Mr. Christian about all of these proposals and what Douglas Council's reaction to the consultation was.
Yeah, we don't support the banding. We see no benefit in that whatsoever. But what we do support is obviously a changing to the values, the capital values, rather than the renting values, which we've had since, I think, 1969, 1970. That's got to change, and that's consistent with the policy we put forward in 2015 as well. They're proposing to look at it by the square meterage. We haven't fully come out and supported that, because we are concerned about how accurate that will be. Because we've been to workshops, and at the workshops they did indicate that there have been very few appeals in Guernsey where this has been put into place. But an awful lot of work went on beforehand. Once the letters went out to people, there was a lot of challenges beforehand and a lot of work to be done to get it right. So that's why they didn't have many appeals. But nobody could estimate how much that would cost, what the administration involved would be. So obviously there was challenges to just how accurate it would be. So we would have concerns over that.
Wouldn't that always be the case when you're introducing a totally new system?
Yeah, and that could be the case. So I think if they could give us those sort of assurances, it's not something we're going to feel really strongly about.
And just on capital values, I think the reason the Cabinet Office decided to go in this direction is the fact that to do the capital value assessment would cost quite a lot of money, and this is supposed to be a cheaper way of addressing it. Would you rather see capital values despite the cost?
We would, because I think what's confusing is we're getting told all different figures. In the last Parliament, we were told it was £1 million, then we were told it was £2 million. I'm being told now it's £4 to £5 million, and I just cannot see it. People just seem to be plucking figures out of the air without somebody actually going out and doing the work and saying this is the true cost of carrying out this exercise. But certainly as a council body, and with the advice of our officers who did a lot of work for my committee on it, we looked at all the various different options that came forward, and we still felt that the capital values was the right way to go forward.
Now that's the assessment, but obviously the one you're more concerned about, perhaps, or it certainly came through in that way, is the proposal to take business rates with a central rating agency and then distribute them. You're very much opposed to that.
Yeah, we most certainly are. I mean, this is just grabbing rates from local authorities, and I think any local authority that attended the workshop that's got many commercial premises in their area was totally opposed to it. Certainly the workshop I attended. All that will happen here is that the commercial rates will go from the Borough of Douglas, of which makes up a substantial amount of the money we have available to provide the services and the facilities that we do provide. And then we'd have to go along with our begging bowl like Oliver would and say, can we please have some money to do something in our area? I mean, that's totally unacceptable. At the workshop it was indicated this money would go into one central agency, you would apply for it, and it'd be for like skate parks and climbing walls. Well, they're things local authorities should be providing their area anyway if they feel their people want it, and you rate for it, and you stand by that decision come the forthcoming elections. End off. There's no reason for it to be collected by central government or an agency. There'll be an administration nightmare. But also they refer to national community policies. It's to fund national community policies. What on earth does that mean? Does that mean it's going to fund the likes of the NSC and other things that government or the taxpayer currently finance? National community policies should be funded by the taxpayer, not doing a grab for the rates of a local authority. The effect it will have is that if they were to take that money off us, there would be a drastic cut in services and facilities a local authority could provide. Also, it would have a very serious impact in relation to the amount of loans that we have outstanding on how we repay those loans, because we don't split the rates when it comes in. We don't say that's commercial, that's domestic. It goes into one pot. We determine the level of services and functions we want to provide, and then we set the rate for the forthcoming financial year. So there is no division there. So it's something we are totally opposed to. I think many other local authorities will be opposed to it as well.
But is it fair that you've got a collection of local authorities that do get to cream off a lucrative amount of commercial rates? Is that fair? Is there an inherent imbalance, it seems, or that's what they're proposing?
Should other local authorities not make their areas more attractive that these businesses want to go there?
But they might not be able to afford to do so, which is where the assistance comes in. That's the idea they're proposing anyway.
Well, that's the idea they're proposing, but we've got to say around the island there are some very low rates. Those rates are low because those commissioners for that area determine there's no need to provide any greater facilities, and I understand all of that. But if they were to turn around and say, right, we are going to rate higher in this area because we want to create this area to attract new business in, there'd be all sorts of funding and grants that would come from government to do that. That's what should happen. It shouldn't be a case of the local authorities that have the commercial businesses there now that we're just going to take that money off you. That is just not fair.
In terms of your commercially rated properties, how much does it cost to service them in Douglas? Is it an expensive endeavour?
Well, it costs the same as a domestic property. Because, I mean, they have their bin emptyings, they have the use of all our street lighting, they use all our other facilities within the town. So, I mean, there is exactly the same cost as what there is to a domestic customer. And in fact, sometimes they'll pay more because they'll have 2 or 3 bin lifts during the course of a week, so of which they've got to pay extra for as well, you know. So they could actually pay more, but they still choose to be within those areas. That's where they've decided they want to locate their business.
Do you feel threatened by some of the proposals in here? I mean, obviously you want to secure your income, but does it feel threatening?
It does. I think this is another way of trying to reform local government without doing it correctly. I mean, I've spoken to several ministers and I've turned around and said that, you know, our stance has always been 5 local authorities. I've been told to stop saying 4+1. 5 local authorities around the island. Make those authorities a lot stronger. Give them the powers that they require. They'll have the opportunity to rate for what they need in their area. And that's the way they should go. But we seem to be tinkering from all different angles at local authorities. That's not the way to go about it. That's not going to sort out the issue that we've had for many, many years, that there is a feeling on the island, there's a perception there's too many elected members, too many local authorities. You know, somebody wants to really get to grips with it and sit down and have a full proper debate and then let Parliament make a decision. And if Parliament decided, no, we're staying with the 22 that we've got because it works on the Isle of Man, there's not really going to be the great savings people say there's going to save, well, make that decision and bring that debate for an end for many years to come.
But isn't that what's decided here, perhaps? The fact that they haven't decided to do local authority reform, they've decided to change the rates instead. Is this not an expression of their intention to reform by keeping the 22 but changing the way rates are collected instead?
Well, possibly, but they're not saying that. In fact, they're saying the opposite. They turn around saying this has got nothing to do with local government reform. We challenged them at the workshop and they turned around and said, no, we've been asked to make it very clear. This has got nothing to do with local government reform, 2 completely separate issues, but they're not. They're muddying the waters, I'm afraid. And I think there will be a lot of opposition to it. And certainly from Douglas's point of view, we are firmly opposed to that element of it. There's other areas of it we can support, but in relation to just doing a grab for our funding, we are totally opposed, and we will unite with other authorities who feel as strongly.
Council leader David Christian. Well, the Policy and Reform Minister says nothing has been decided on rates modernisation and the ongoing consultation is simply presenting the facts. Chris Thomas says the questions in the survey are shaped to be objective and present the current lay of the land, including how rates income is spread across the island. He says there's been demand for years for rates modernisation and the Cabinet Office is trying to do something about it, not kick the issue down the line. I asked him, with local authorities like Douglas railing against an all-island rate proposal, why he chose to include it.
2 main points to say, Ewan. The first one is there's no proposal to do anything. This is a consultation. 3 questions were asked after presenting the facts of the distribution of non-domestic rates about whether we should consider doing something else in terms of non-domestic rates. That's the first point. And the second point is railing, it's your word. I would like to think that we're looking at this rationally and objectively. I suppose there's a third point as well, which is why would Douglas and Braddon lose income if every penny that they get from non-domestic rates is spent wisely in the interests of ratepayers, domestic and non-domestic? Presumably, they would carry on getting it by consensus because they're delivering valuable national community policies.
But they would argue that they would no longer be in control of that income and it would come to the decisions of a central authority. whatever that authority is made up of, to make those decisions.
Exactly. Who would be the central authority? That again is just making assumptions. You've hit the nail on the head here, really, Ewan. What you're saying is people are saying what's in their interests in the past should carry on in the future. And I've put down a consultation on behalf of national politicians, all of us. It's not the Thomas plan. There's been a demand for a great number of years for rates modernisation, and we're trying to do something about it. We put down a series of questions, and we'll come back with a proposal in Tynwald soon to take things forward, to make things fairer, to make local authorities, the Water and Sewerage Authority, have a chance to raise revenue more fairly. And I don't want to start from Douglas's interests or Braddon's interests or anywhere else's interests. I want what's best for the island's ratepayers, for the island's taxpayers, and for the people in the island who receive local water and sewerage services.
Is it best for the island that there are a collection of local authorities that do seem to have a lot more income than others due to the amount of commercial properties that they can rate in their areas?
It might be that scale breeds efficiency, or it might be that scale and history has created situations where some authorities are able to waste lots of money. That's the question that we need to have. Not now, because this is about a very simple process of rates modernisation. Outcomes I'm looking for from this process would be Tynwald to resolve in June that we do this in terms of the way that we look to measure properties, to make the rateable system fairer. However we then value each square metre, we at least have got to measure it, and I'm looking to propose something to Tynwald. Second thing is we need to modernise the law. The law is dated 1953. It's been amended from time to time. We need an update in the law to deal with lots of anomalies. Thirdly, I think we need to set in process a group of people to work on what we want from the money raised by rates, and that might lead into local authority transition or local authority reform even. You can't just keep putting issues off. If issues need tackling, tackle them, and that involves making decisions.
You have decided, though, I know you've said all the cards are on the table here, but you have decided to put this in this consultation, and there does seem to be an emphasis on that non-domestic issue as well as the other issues. You may claim that it's simply quite a straightforward process, but there clearly is a guiding hand in some direction here by what you've chosen to put in the consultation. Would that be fair to say?
It is. When I first made a statement about rates a couple of years ago, I said that previously rates modernisation had only been in the context of domestic rates modernisation. At that time, 2014-15, people said, well, why not look at non-domestic rates? So I opened it up to non-domestic rates and made a statement to Tynwald that we would consult on non-domestic rates. We've done that. It's not a biased consultation to present the facts and ask people questions after they know the facts. That's what we've done. We've just presented the facts and asked people what they think. We've asked one question about whether it's fair that some people get more than others and from non-domestic rates. We've asked a second question about whether or not all non-domestic rates should be collected centrally. We've used the word central authority, but I think authority isn't the important word in that. It's should all non-domestic rates be collected into one pool by somebody? It could be a local authority, it could be a group of people working together. And then thirdly, we've asked if rates were collected centrally, what should the money raised be spent on? Now, I heard this week that skate parks were mentioned. Well, I can absolutely assure the local authorities that it's not skate parks we have in mind entirely. Local authorities provide a huge range of services, and what we're saying is, do we need to think about the money being raised as well as the provision? And that's what rates is about. That's how money is raised for local authorities.
The assertion by some local authorities has been, these are in our areas, we have to service them, we should be the ones who decide or use that money as a result of where these places are located and the subsequent services we have to provide. Would it be fairer to take that away from them, to help smaller local authorities who can't really get off the ground financially to be more ambitious?
There are two things in rates. There's the rateable value and then there's the rate in the pound. The rate in the pound is different between different local authorities by a factor of 10. One local authority nearly has 10 times as much rate in the pound as the lowest rated local authority. Rateable value isn't distributed equally. I've just put both those things on the table and I'm asking the question, is that fair?
On this all-island rate issue, just to sum it up, the resistance in the media has come from Braddon and Douglas, and I know Bride have concerns as well. Other local authorities with a large proportion of non-domestic rates in their rates income have troubled a bit by this. What would you say to them?
Yeah, we're putting out a question that's been needed to be answered for a long time. If you want rates modernisation, you've got to find a way to do it. This is an efficient way of doing it. The main point in this consultation is the proposal to have aerial photographs and a computer system to actually come up with a standard measure that can be then used for rateable value. We haven't decided how each square metre will be valued. We haven't decided who will be involved in that process. They're all questions for a later date. There's certainly a difference between different parts of the island in terms of the proportion of non-domestic rates that are available to provide local services and also water and sewerage services, by the way. But let's get beyond that. This is a consultation. We'll have a debate in Tynwald, June, I hope. The politics comes afterwards. I've done everything I can to keep this process apolitical. It's technical. It's asking questions. I haven't been going along to the workshops myself. Of course, it's a political issue. Rates is massively political, but I hope that we can all sit down together from around the island and work out something that works best for all ratepayers, all taxpayers, and in fact the provision of local services and water and sewerage services in our island.
Now, you'll be coming back in June. That's the plan, to Tynwald to discuss a plan. Whatever you decide is going to affect different authorities differently. Each local authority on the island has different interests based on their scale. There are always going to be some who are disappointed with what you do and some who are very pleased with what you do.
Of course there are, and one of the principles of this review is that we're not looking at local authority reform per se, but the issues that come up in this consultation will inform subsequent discussions about local authorities. And you're quite right, there'll be winners and losers amongst particular households, there'll be winners and losers in particular areas. That's why this is so difficult. But this government, this group of politicians that's around in our island at the moment, does seem to be up for sorting out challenges that have been around for ages, and this is yet another one of the ones that needs to be sorted.
Policy and Reform Minister Chris Thomas. The consultation closes on the 21st of April, with the Cabinet Office intending to set out a full plan for rates modernisation by June this year. You're listening to Agenda on Manx Radio. A political party says the Manx public could buy shares in the steam packet to benefit from government's nationalisation of the company. The idea has been floated by LibVann as a way of letting the Manx people have a direct stake in the investment, which cost them, the taxpayer, £124 million. Government bought the company last year from Banco Espirito Santo, and last month Tynwald approved new heads of terms for the Sea Services Agreement. The document is a letter of intent which sets out how future sea services will be delivered, though it's not a legally binding document. Ownership of the Victoria Pier Linkspan, £70 million worth of investment in new vessels, special discounts and minimum sailings requirements have all been included or at least mooted as part of any deal. The Department of Infrastructure is right now in the process of finalising a 25-year agreement with the steam packet, which won't come into force until 2020. Well, LibVann party member and MHK Laurie Hooper says it's important money makes its way back into the public's pockets without government interference. His party held a public question and answer session last week to explain what's going on with the heads of terms and to put forward its proposal for direct public investment. I was at the event and spoke to Mr. Hooper.
So the purpose of this evening was really to have a discussion. Agreement's been approved. There's no point revisiting old ground, so we thought we'd just get out there and try and do a bit of a public service, talk to people about something that's already happened, get some views and feedback and just share some information, and that was quite positive. One of the things that hasn't been finalised yet about the steam packet is what the future relationship will look like, the financial restructuring, as it were. And the LibVann Party has for a long time had a policy that the Isle of Man government should take ownership of the steam packet, should take a stake in that in some way, and that actually that Manx people should be given the opportunity to somehow share in that stake. So whether that is through being able to acquire some of the shares or through investment in the company in other ways, the proposal from the party as part of the proposed financial restructuring is that in some way the Manx public are offered the opportunity to invest and to benefit from this investment directly, so they'll be able to see real money in their pockets from dividend receipts, and also maybe you could attach some discounts and benefits to the shares or whatever you do to give people discounts on ferry trips or what have you. So it's a proposal that we've been floating around the party for a little while. It's a proposal that's been floated already, I think, on the floor of Tynwald once or twice by myself. And I thought we'd just test it out here with people that turned up, and it seemed to go down reasonably well.
What are the principles that define the proposal to make the benefit of the steam packet being nationalised accessible to everybody? Why do you think it's important that this is in there?
What it boils down to is the steam packet has been purchased with Manx taxpayers' money, and at the end of the day, the LibVann government is going to see a direct benefit from that. But really, if it's taxpayers' money that's been invested, surely the taxpayers themselves should have an opportunity to say, I'd like to have a direct stake in that. And at the end of the day, it's our national steam packet company. It's our national lifeline over the sea. So really, if it's ours, surely we should all have a stake in that.
But doesn't also a lot of the money spent on the steam packet is also taxpayers as well? So is it actually an extra dividend, considering you were sort of funding the service by using it all the time?
I think in some ways you might be right, but actually all the money comes out of a pot, and we'd like to recoup that back in the government coffers at some way. One of the complications of living on the island, I suppose, is that money going into the government doesn't necessarily make its way back into people's pockets, and you're reliant then on government making what you feel are the right decisions in order to get that money to you. Whereas if you had the opportunity to invest yourself directly, and you can bypass that whole process and say, yeah, actually, I would like to see some of that return directly. You're not then worried about politicians interfering or governments changing. You say, no, it's our steam packet company. We've all got a stake in it, and we're all sharing equally, individuals and government, all sharing equally in the benefits of this purchase.
There were a number of concerns based on technicalities, really, about how this would work. But would it be intended to be accessible to everybody? I mean, one of the worries raised here was that you might get somebody buying up loads of shares as an individual rather than being accessible to maybe the poorer off in society as well.
Yeah, you'd want to build safeguards into whatever method of refinancing that the government eventually goes with. You'd want to build safeguards in to make sure that it was residents of the Isle of Man that could benefit, and that, you're right, everyone should be able to benefit. It should be accessible for everyone, an opportunity for every person on the Isle of Man, not just the wealthier people in society. And there are plenty of ways you can do that, but at the moment it's very much a conceptual idea that we're floating to try and convince really not just the public but also government that we should be pursuing this idea that ordinary Manx people should have the opportunity to invest, and if the government is going out to refinance in some way, it shouldn't just be going out to the big banks and the big investment companies. They should be saying actually to the Manx people, let's see if you guys want to have a stake in this as well.
So has there been any inspiration for this idea in terms of the experiences of other countries?
It's really a sense of equity, I think, a sense of equality, that actually we're a small island, and we all do like to get involved in a lot of stuff that's community-led on the Isle of Man, and this was just an extension of that. So it comes along with other ideas. The party's proposing things like a participatory budget system whereby people get to choose where some of their money is spent directly, and it's just an extension of that concept, really, that people should have the opportunity to have a direct say in not everything government does, because that's not practical, but in some key things. Actually, if there is a way of giving people direct influence and direct input and a direct benefit, well, shouldn't we be exploring that?
Would it be possible, by an extension of that, have representatives of the public in some way involved in the strategic management of the steam packet company, or would that be a stretch too far?
I think that might be a stretch too far, simply because of the complexities of running an organisation like the steam packet, especially when there's government involvement. I mean, you've already got Tynwald and Treasury and everyone involved with it, so you might risk overcomplicating things. From a personal level, I'm happy to let our elected representatives and the people at the steam packet who know what they're doing actually run the company and deal with the strategic direction. But when it comes to actually benefiting then from those decisions, which obviously we hope will be good decisions, the benefits really could be shared with as many people as possible, and that's the aim of this proposal, really.
Now, just to want to pick you up finally on you've held this Q&A. Has there been an absence of clear communication from the government over some of the ideas that are being meted over in the heads of terms? Has there been a bit of a gap in telling the public exactly what's going on here? The information may be out there, but perhaps it hasn't been articulated in the clearest manner.
There was a lot of stakeholder engagement in the process of developing these heads of terms, and then the heads of terms went to Tynwald, and there was a bit of publicity around that. But after that, it seems that there has been a bit of a vacuum. So the reason really that we decided to host this was because we felt that, well, it's all been done and dusted. It's all out there in public. So if anyone has any questions, let's do some explaining. You know, as an MHK, I've got some of this information. I've got access to all the paperwork, so I've got all the detail, and most of that detail, if not all of it, is already out there in the public. So if they need someone to just contextualise it, well, that's a void that the party felt we could fill. And actually, that's one of the benefits, really, of having parties like LibVann on the island, is that we can act as that conduit sometimes to enable discussion with people around issues, not just when there's a problem or something needs fixing, but actually just on the more day-to-day stuff that's going on. Well, this has happened. The steam packet's been purchased, the heads of terms have been signed, so actually, why shouldn't people have the opportunity to have some information about this? Let's have a conversation. That's what party politics is all about. It's engaging in that ongoing conversation between politicians and the public, and this is just another example of that.
Ramsey MHK, Laurie Hooper. Well, with that in mind, planning permission has been given just last week for the Manx ferry terminal in Liverpool to replace the pierhead, which has been the island's landing stage for over a century. John Moss spoke to Infrastructure Minister Ray Harmer.
Absolutely superb news with three sort of, if you like, big ticket items, the PROM, the Sea Services Agreement and now this. This gives us confidence now to move forward and deliver that service. It will then next come to Tynwald for the final financial amount. It gives us confidence to actually move forward.
Because officially at the end of this year, we did supposed to leave the ferry, didn't the pierhead?
But we're working with.
So we're not going to be we're not going to be told go.
No, we're working with Liverpool Council on all of that. But this is a major significant thing. It's the first time, if you like, that we've held a piece of land across. So it's really quite an exciting day.
Yeah, and the date, we're still talking years, aren't we?
We're not talking too long. We're still talking into 2021. So we'll be moving very quickly.
And you happy that all the areas where people are concerned about where to leave their vehicles when they come to collect people, that sort of thing, has that been sorted out?
Yes, because it has it's good marshalling areas, there are good links,
people can get into Liverpool.
Exactly, it's going to be a massive...
buses, that sort of thing?
Buses and those sort of things, and it's going to be massively and hugely beneficial for the island and really quite a feather in our cap.
But people have got to enjoy using it, haven't they?
And it's a modern, up-to-date, environmentally, it's a modern building, a modern facility that's going to see massive improvements of what we've had to all face over the last few years.
Again, just repeat once again, people will be able to get out from it into Liverpool quite easily.
Yes.
Infrastructure Minister Ray Harmer speaking there to John Moss. That's all from tonight's programme. I'll be off next week as it's a bank holiday, but we'll have more Agenda the week after that. And you can listen again to this episode, or indeed any episode of Agenda, online as a podcast. But for now, and until then, have a good evening and Guramayu.